Chapter 17. The Start of the Trouble. On a cold and rainy Friday morning, January the 7th, 1938, residents of the picturesque hamlet of Hampton at the foot of Tennessee's Great Smoky Mountains were sleeping peacefully. Suddenly, they were rudely awakened by a deafening dynamite blast at 3:50 a.m. The huge explosion blew a 6-room bungalow on Lotus Avenue into shambles. The blast claimed the lives of the 3 little Gouge girls, Sonia, 9, Lorene, 8, and Roma Jean, 6. Their mother, Pauline, was seriously injured but somehow lived. The target of the attack, their father, Harmon, wasn't at home that night. Church Lester, White Miller Tollett, Lee Walker, and Ulysses Walling from Bledsoe County drove the 450-mile round trip from Pikeville that night to place that dynamite and light the fuse that killed those 3 little girls. All newspapers in East Tennessee carried large articles with minute details of this case from the initial blast all the way through the 9-day trial which ended March the 3rd. The gruesome story attracted national attention and was featured in several detective magazines. This vengeful act shocked the nation and became the crime of the century in East Tennessee. Events leading up to this climax date, they date back to several years, to the 1920s, when several of Major and Amanda Tollett's sons and daughters moved to Hampton from their home in Bledsoe County. Major and Amanda lived on a beautiful farm in the upper end of the picturesque Sequatchie Valley on East Valley Road. The rock fence nestled on each side of the lane leading to their attractive frame house was likely built by slaves prior to the Civil War. Major Tollett was a successful farmer and a merchant. He also studied law on his own until his law books were destroyed by a fire in his home. Major was never admitted to the bar, but he wrote deeds and wills and filled out legal papers for loans. He was also the Sunday school superintendent for many years at Stony Point Methodist Church, where he and Amanda were members. Amanda was known as a good neighbor who was ever mindful of the sick and needy in the community, taking baskets of food to them. She was hospitable and famous for her good cooking. Traveling salesmen always managed to spend the night at their home when they passed through. Major and Amanda had been married 9 years and had 4 children. In 1892, when Major's 3 brothers killed Amanda's father, Aaron A. Swafford, and her brother at a presidential election in the Melvin community. See the Swafford-Tollett feud book for many fascinating details of this and other deadly altercations between the Swaffords and the Tolletts. Can you imagine the heartbreak this tragic event caused this close-knit family? These killings did not affect the love Major and Amanda had for each other, but their sons Crave, White Miller, and Arnold had their volatile mixture of Tollett and Swafford blood flowing through their veins. Major and Amanda had 8 other children: Aaron, Nancy, Thomas, Thompson, Hester, May, Brian, Betsy, and Pauline May. They moved to the Bramer community on the northeast side of Hampton sometime around 1920 or earlier. Hampton is a small town in Carter County, 5 miles southeast of Elizabethton. May was first employed as a secretary for the Pittsburgh Lumber Company. The company's headquarters was located in a large rock building in Bramer, which became known as the Rock Castle. May later purchased a large home just below the building and turned it into a boarding home. She soon struck out on her own and opened an office in Elizabethton, where she was both a successful stenographer and court reporter. The bustling city of Elizabethton, located on the convergence of the Watauga and Doe Rivers, is the county seat of Carter County and the home of numerous industries in the 1930s. May soon wrote letters to her brothers and sisters urging them to join her in taking advantage of this rich opportunities in Carter County. May was a fine lady who was well respected throughout the county. In the mid or late 1920s, May's 2 brothers, Crave and Arnold, answered her call and moved to Bramer. Together, Crave, Arnold, and May purchased a general store. Later, Sister Pauline joined them. Then she met Frank Thompson, who was living in a civilian Conservation Corps camp and working on a construction crew building the Watauga Dam in Carter County. Pauline and Frank were married August the 21st, 1934. That same year, younger brother White Miller moved to Bramer, working for his sister and his brothers in their store. May's brothers lived in her boarding house. White Miller had served a short jail sentence on a whiskey charge in Bledsoe County prior to moving to Carter County. The three Tollett brothers held shooting matches on a rifle range in the nearby mountains. Every Saturday, sportsmen from miles around competed for cash prizes. Since the Tolletts were expert marksmen, they declared themselves ineligible for the prizes. However, they did give exhibitions, and their reputation as crack shots became well known in the area. Crave even served as the deputy sheriff of Carter County for a time. Arnold became good friends with Harmon Gouge, pronounced Gouge, a local man. Harmon was a half-brother of K.P. Banks, who was the Carter County superintendent of schools and a leader in country politics. Harmon, his wife Pauline, and their three little daughters, lived in a new 6-room bungalow in Hampton. Harmon was a short, heavy-set man who had a good job as a rayon plant in Elizabethton and owned 2 filling stations near his home. Arnold married Gladys Kate of Bramer on December the 15th, 1933. Gladys and Pauline were second cousins and good friends. Arnold and Gladys even lived with Harmon and Pauline for a few months. Both Gladys and Pauline worked together in the Bimberg textile plant in Elizabethton. Gladys said, "Arnold was a wonderful husband, and he was a very good man to me. He was also a good man, but Arnold would not let anyone run over him." She also said Pauline Gouge was a good person. A person who knew the Tolletts well said Arnold was the best one of the 3 Tollett brothers who moved to Hampton. He sold whiskey, but he was clever, likable, and not overbearing. That same person described White Miller as likable, but with a quick temper and overbearing at times. Jim Perry, a lifelong resident of Hampton, was in Company A of the Hampton, Tennessee National Guard several years with Arnold. They spent one day a month in Elizabethton and attended a summer camp for 2 weeks in Tullahoma each year. Jim said Arnold was a tall, good-looking young man with a wonderful personality. Arnold and Harmon later purchased Highcliffe Tavern, a dance hall and beer garden known as the Bluebird, on a major highway on the outskirts of Hampton. Under their agreement, Arnold was to manage the Bluebird, and silent partner Harmon would hold on to his full-time job at the rayon plant. Ori Cotton Lawson worked for Arnold at the Bluebird. Whiskey was also sold at the tavern, which of course was illegal. But with Harmon's political connections, there was no record of the Bluebird ever being raided. During this era, the whiskey business flourished as much in the hills and mountains of Carter County as it did in Bledsoe County. As many as 25 stills were estimated to have been operating in the mountains around Hampton during the mid and late 30s. Several hundred people in the area were involved in the illegal whiskey business. Crave and White Miller moved back to Bledsoe County sometime around 1934. Arnold and May and his sister and brother-in-law, Pauline and Frank Thompson, stayed in Carter County. Crave and White Miller became the owners of Tollett Restaurant in the heart of Pikeville at the southeast corner of Main Street and Cumberland Avenue, where the city's fire department is now located. In addition to serving good food, they served beer and whiskey by the glass or by the bottle. One could purchase whiskey to go by the half pint, the quart, the gallon, or any quantity the customer wanted. Of course, the sale of whiskey was illegal, but the Tolletts and Bledsoe County Sheriff Walter Walling were very close friends. Walter was a regular customer at the restaurant, and he never raided them. When Walter was elected sheriff of Bledsoe County in 1934, it was the equivalent of putting the fox in charge of the hen house. He was a moonshiner and a bootlegger most of his adult life, both before and after serving as sheriff. Walter was reported to have shot at Chief U.S. Revenuer Logan Malloy during a whiskey raid on Cumberland Mountain in Van Buren County in 1919. He missed Malloy but shot the cigar out of his mouth. Walter served a year and a day in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary as a result of this raid. However, other than being sympathetic to the liquor industry, Walter was intelligent, and he was said to have been a good sheriff. He served 2 terms from 1934 to 38. He ran for a 3rd term in 38 but was defeated. Crave Tollett and Lee Walker were Bledsoe County deputies under Walter Walling. Walling was married at least 3 times and he had several children. In 1944, Walter and his last wife, Ann, were having serious marital problems. Ann had left her husband and was staying with her sister Pearl and her husband Henry Gill in their home south of Dayton. Walter took his young son Jimmy, went to the Gill home to confront Ann. Ann, Pearl, Henry, and Ann's friend, Robert Hendon, and Bill Stoll were allegedly in the home at the time. Walter, who was drinking heavily, walked in and told Ann, "You've made a fool of me." Ann replied, "No, you're making a fool of yourself." This was just before all the hell broke loose and the bullets started flying. Walter and Ann were both killed, and Pearl Gill was seriously injured. Walter was one of the shooters, but because of the darkness, it was not clear who the other shooter was or who shot whom. Others involved in law enforcement also met violent ends. In a separate incident, Constable John Clifton was shot and killed just outside of Tollett's restaurant in Pikeville on Sunday afternoon, October the 4th, 1936. John became involved in an argument with Beatty Patton, who was also a constable. John wanted Beatty to help him arrest Hubert Goforth inside the restaurant for public drunkenness. Additionally, John allegedly wanted Beatty to help him raid the restaurant for selling whiskey. But since Beatty was a close friend and a drinking buddy of the Tolletts, he refused. The 2 men became involved in a heated argument, which led to a gun battle at the intersection of Main Street and Cumberland Avenue. John was on the east side of the intersection, and Beatty was on the west side, shooting at each other with pistols. Witnesses said between 8 and 15 shots were fired, and John was hit, and he fell dead on the pavement. Most people assumed Beatty fired the fatal shot, but very few people knew what actually happened. According to Junior Bridgman and Sam Swafford, Crave Tollett always had a loaded gun hidden under a long cabinet in the back of the restaurant. He had 2 men working for him, Sam Swafford and Archie Robertson. When the shooting was going on outside, he asked Archie to hand him his pistol. Crave was an expert marksman. He raised the side door of the building and shot John Clifton with his first and only shot. Crave then quickly shut the door, handed the gun back to Archie, and in a commanding voice told Sam and Archie, "You didn't see a damn thing." Crave then walked back into the restaurant as if nothing had happened. Only Crave, Sam, and Archie knew who actually killed John Clifton, and for many years they didn't tell anyone. Even Beatty Patton went to his grave thinking he killed John. Beatty was arrested and charged with murder, but at a January 37 hearing, the grand jury elected to not indict Patton for lack of evidence. Crave was a character who was always joking and having fun. One day, a well-to-do, dapperly dressed young man from Chattanooga went passing through Pikeville in his brand-new Model A Ford car. He stopped at Tollett's restaurant and ordered a big steak dinner. Crave was in the kitchen with his friend Hub Swafford, who was also quite a character. They hatched a plot to scare the strangers just as the waitress delivered the steak dinner to him. Hub went out to the back door, slipped around, and came back in the front door. As he came in, Crave came out of the kitchen. Crave and Hub started cussing and yelling at each other with their guns in their hands. As planned, Hub was standing close to the stranger, and the 2 men were acting like they were really going to kill each other. The terrified young man ran out of the restaurant, jumped in his car, and sped off as fast as he could. When Crave and Hub were through laughing, they sat down and ate that big steak dinner that the stranger had abandoned. At one time, White Miller was mayor of Pikeville, and he was serving as coroner of Bledsoe County in 1938. He was always nicely dressed and normally wore a white shirt. He was very sociable and a ladies' man. One person said, White Miller was good-hearted and likable, but was high-strung with a quick temper. Another person said, if White Miller was your enemy, he was one of the meanest and most dangerous men in the county. His girlfriend was Myrtle Ferguson, a beautiful blonde and a charming young lady. Her father was Vander Ferguson, who lived between the Brayton and Hendon communities on Walden's Ridge, and he was one of the biggest moonshiners in Bledsoe County. He, White Miller, Crave, and Church were friends who worked closely together in their whiskey business. Crave, White Miller, Arnold, and Harmon Gouge also joined forces in the illegal business, allegedly transporting whiskey back and forth between Bledsoe and Carter counties. Depending on which area federal revenuers were concentrating on at the time, Crave and White Miller often visited with May, Arnold and his wife, and Harmon and his wife at Hampton. In fact, Arnold and Harmon and their wives often traveled to Bledsoe County together to visit the Tollets. John and Anna Robertson lived in the head of the Sequatchie Valley from 1930 to 1936. Their son, Jim Sam Robertson, who was a teenager during the time, vividly remembers White Miller, Crave, Arnold, and Harmon. In the 1930s, square dances were often held on Saturday nights at different homes in the head of the valley. Jim Sam liked to dance and normally attended most of them. He remembers going to square dances at the home of Sig Little, Paul Alt, Hugh Wilson, Fate Parham, Heck Dar, Claude Swafford, Shorty McCart, Wayman Henry, Lloyd Selby, Floyd Swafford, as well as at his parents' house, and there was always whiskey available at these dances. Jim Sam said White Miller was a bootlegger who made good money from whiskey sales at these dances. The dances started around 8 o'clock at night and lasted anywhere from 1 o'clock until the sun came up Sunday morning. They normally had 2, 3, or 4 musicians who played guitar, mandolin, banjo, or bass, but there was always a fiddle. Normally there was no singing, just instruments. The host hired the musicians and charged 10 cents for a 10 to 15-minute set. Arnold Tollett and Harmon Gouge and their wives spent 2 or 3 months with Arnold's parents in Bledsoe County, one of 2 summers. Arnold and Harmon seemed to be very close friends, who sold whiskey a while back at Arnold's home. The short, heavy-set Harmon was called Haystack. Arnold's wife Gladys liked to square dance, and Jim Sam often danced with her while Arnold was busy selling whiskey. Some of the homeowners did not allow anyone to drink openly in their homes, and some did. Where they were not allowed to drink inside, the boys and men passed the bottle around outside in the yard. But back in Carter County, the close friendship between Arnold Tollett and Harmon Gouge started to deteriorate in late 1936 and early 1937. At the time, Arnold and Gladys were living with Arnold's sister May in her boarding house. Arnold and Harmon's Bluebird Tavern was experiencing financial difficulties, causing tension to build between the 2 owners. They had heated arguments over their whiskey business, and they fell out over money. Some said the argument was over a shipment of Christmas moonshine which disappeared, and each accused the other of selling it. Arnold's wife Gladys gave birth to their only child on the morning of January the 30th, 1937. Arnold needed money to pay the doctor and hospital bill and started looking for Harmon to ask him for the money he thought he was owed. After 7:30 that evening, Arnold found Harmon at the Ash Trail service station at the State Line Highway at the northern end of Hampton. There was a heated argument. Harmon claimed Arnold said, "You've been talking about me, and I've been talking about you. We're either going to fight it out, or we're going to shoot it out." Harmon said he told Arnold he did not want to fight, and he started walking away. He said Arnold then grabbed his arm, pulled him outside, and pulled a knife. Harmon then pulled his pistol and shot Arnold in the spine, paralyzing his legs. but there were no witnesses. Harmon immediately called Carter County Sheriff J.M. Moreland and told him of the incident. Moreland arrested Harmon, who was released that same evening under $10,000 bond. Harmon said it was either kill Arnold or be killed. Arnold was rushed to the hospital in Elizabethton, where his wife remained after giving birth earlier in the day. Gladys was able to take their baby daughter to Arnold's room for him to visit prior to his death in the hospital on February the 5th, 6 days after he was shot. His body was transported back to Bledsoe County, where services were held at the Patton School and Church in Melvin. Arnold was buried in Tollett Cemetery on top of a hill overlooking the beautiful Sequatchie Valley. His death, 225 miles from home, was a bitter blow to the Tolletts. Arnold's elderly father, Major, and his sons, Crave and White Miller, made several trips to Carter County. They spoke of family honor and revenge and made certain that those words were repeated to Harmon Gouge. The Tollett family hired lawyers to assist the state in prosecuting Harmon during his scheduled trial 4 months later at the May 1937 term of court. A large delegation of Tolletts and their friends were on hand at the trial of Elizabethton. The Gouge family were as politically powerful in Carter County as the Tolletts were in Bledsoe County. The judge rescheduled Harmon's trial to be heard at the February 1938 term of court, a delay of over a year after Arnold had been gunned down. This large, long delay agitated the Tolletts even more as they glared at Harmon and the judge.